back with Warrior Mode. Not the best of starts to the show, but I can guarantee we are going to make up for that and then some with today's special guest. Bill Bean is here. We've got Travis here. Bill, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. Excited about this show. I've really been looking forward to this because this guy is the real deal, and we've wanted to have him on for a while, so I'm glad that it's finally here.
Yeah, Travis, I'm looking forward to this one, man.
Hey, man, I'm right there with you and Bill. Very excited. I was looking over the talking points that Bill has sent us for our guest tonight. It's going to be some very interesting stuff. And just can't wait to get started. I look forward to Sundays. You guys know that. It helps me wind out my week and also gets me started for the upcoming week here in beautiful Commonwealth of Kentucky and getting ready for this Thanksgiving week, as a matter of fact. Very short week for us here.
Ah, good. I hope you have a good time. So, Bill, I'm going to come to you quickly. I had a disaster with Streamlabs before the show, as you guys know. So I'm going to come to you because tonight you've brought on a good friend of yours, and I believe you've appeared on tonight's guest's own show. So tell us, who are we going to be talking to today?
Yeah, we've got Devin Nicholson, a.k.a. Hannibal, and he does have quite a background. This is a man after my own heart, I'll tell you. He is somebody that I have a great deal of respect for, and he's also somebody that I've been praying for, and we've prayed for him on the show the last couple of weeks. He's recently lost his beloved grandmother, and I'm very sorry for him. And Kev, you and I had a discussion before the show that you're similar to Devin and I, that you also had a grandmother that was the closest person to you in the world that you lost. So we certainly share in the pain and the mourning and the grief that Devin is going through right now.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, my grandmother was very instrumental in my own kind of formative years, so I can empathize entirely. And of course, Bill, having read your book and knowing you well, I know just how it affected you too. So I imagine there's a lot of people out there that have been through it, and it's yeah, it's something you don't forget, that's for sure. But like you said to me, Bill, you know, someday you'll see them again. So
yes,
yeah, there you go.
I believe it 1,000,000%, and I believe that all of us will see our beloved grandmothers again in God's heavenly kingdom. I believe it 1,000,000%, and I praise God for that. So I'll go on now with Devin's background, which is quite extensive. He's a professional wrestler and promoter in Canada. His promotion is called Great North Wrestling. He's a former IWA Puerto Rico Intercontinental Champion and two-time WWC Puerto Rican Tag Team champion with Black Pain. He has also had matches for WWE and had a contract offer with WWE and has wrestled for Impact Wrestling. He's wrestled internationally as a professional wrestler. And he's also, and this is very impressive as well, Devin is a former national champion in freestyle wrestling and Canadian Olympic qualification trial silver medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling. He has won the Canadian Open and the Ontario Championships in grappling, which is submission wrestling. He won a gold medal in the at the 2001 Junior National Championships in London, Ontario. A month later, he gained a spot on the Canadian Junior National Team after winning the national team trials in Vancouver, British Columbia. Devin also won the OFSAA Wrestling High School Championship in 2000 and 2001 and didn't even have a single point scored against him. That's impressive. He was named Amateur Wrestler of the Year by the city of Ottawa in 2001. He's a three-time Canadian champion in pro wrestling and is 3-0 in kickboxing, which also is impressive. Devin also has a very successful media endeavor. The Hannibal TV is the most viewed pro wrestling YouTube channel based in Canada with 150 million video views. That is impressive. And I want to tell you, I watch his shows all the time. I watch his interviews. I think he's great. And I think he has gets the best out of the great guests that he brings on. So the channel also includes MMA, boxing, UFO, paranormal, and celebrity interviews, and combat sports news updates. And I was on his show. I was privileged to be on with him, and was really impressed with him, and look forward to hopefully coming back on his show again. The Hannibal TV show airs Fridays at 6 p.m. on Zingo TV channel 250 in Canada, and it can be viewed internationally on the Zingo TV app. There was also a 2012 mini documentary about Devin called This is Hannibal, which won 3 awards at the LA Movie Awards that year. He's had other Canadian TV documentaries made about him that aired on those national networks as well. And to top it all off, as if that isn't enough, he is an avid researcher in UFOs and the paranormal, and that's why he had me on his show, talking about, exorcisms and UFO paranormal phenomena. So without further ado, we will introduce our great guest, Devin Nicholson, aka Hannibal.
Hello, how's it going tonight, everybody?
Very, very good, man. And it's
it's great having him on, isn't it, Kev?
Oh, really nice to meet you, man. Been looking forward to this one since Bill kind of brought it up. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Travis, you looking forward to this one?
I'm excited. I really am. We were talking in the green room before this, about when we started. You and Bill have been doing the show, I think, probably about, 6 months, Kev? 6, 7 months?
Feels like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I came on about 3 months ago, and the guest roster just keeps getting better and better, and the topics get better and more engaging, and tonight is definitely going to be a show just like that.
One thing I forgot to tell Bill for the introduction is I'm also the promoter for Great North Wrestling, which is the most popular wrestling promotion in Canada. I'm wearing a shirt for it right now, and I actually started my YouTube channel at the Hannibal TV, posting videos of Great North Wrestling matches, but as I'm sure we might get into, it's become more known for interviews than matches, although my highest viewed video on my channel has about 9 million views, and it is of a wrestling match. And anyone wondering what the OFSAA championships was that Bill mentioned, I actually won that twice, and the second time I won it, I didn't have points scored against me, as Bill mentioned. That's the equivalent of the state championships in the U.S. For high school wrestling. It stands for Ontario Secondary School Athletic Association Championship. So Ontario is the province, and it's the biggest and most populated province in Canada. So I was very proud of that accomplishment.
It's impressive, everything. I mean, it really is. It's absolutely, this resume rivals any of the, I guarantee you, any of the big name wrestlers, certainly that WWE could offer, or any of those other promotions. So it's very impressive.
Well, unfortunately, but fortunately, I guess you could say now, I did kind of get blackballed from that company, which we might get into the reasons, but out of it, I've ended up becoming my own boss and having success on my own, and now I'm a full-time YouTuber, which I love because it's not just wrestling. As Bill mentioned, I'm very interested in UFOs, or UAPs as they like to call them now, and I have many UFO videos in the hundreds of thousands. My interview with Travis Walton, who was it's what the Fire in the Sky movie was about, the Hollywood movie. That one has about 600,000 or 700,000 views that I did last year, so only in a little over a year. And I'd like to get more interviews on that topic, but as you guys might know, some of the credible people are very elusive.
I tell you what, dude, you can come on. I've got a show on radio during the week, and I usually put it onto YouTube as well. Me and you would get on very well.
I was just going to say that, Kev. I knew that he was speaking your language there.
Yeah, we can geek out on all that stuff, man. But like you say, I was talking about this on a stream earlier on, Devin. It would be the first topic I'd look for on YouTube would be UFOs, but that was back in the day, maybe 10 years, 11 years ago. And now it's just, I don't even bother looking anymore because there's so many lunatics, fantasists, grifters, larpers, and then fake stuff out there that it's really hard to get the genuine
Photoshoppers.
stuff, you know. So it's good to get to people like Travis Walton. I mean, that story there alone, I mean, that's mind blowing, right?
And Paul Hellyer is another one I interviewed, who's a former Minister of National Defense here in Canada. That was one of my prize UFO-related interviews, has, I think, around 300,000 views. He is the highest-ranking government official in the world to be open about it. The first one that came out and said, these things exist. But now, as we know, the U.S. government has actually admitted that UFOs exist, the Pentagon and the U.S. Navy. They're not saying they're alien craft. They're just saying that we don't know what they are. They're in our airspace and they're displaying technology we're not aware of, or we're not aware any other country has. And the 3 videos that they have released, as you guys probably know, they've admitted those aren't the only videos they have, and they've admitted those are just small clips of longer videos.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, and it's a little bit frightening.
It's a soft disclosure, Devin, is what it is, because this goes way, way back. And look, I talked about a little of this with you on your show, that I've had personal experiences. I have seen these things, and I have seen non-human looking beings and had interactions with them as well. So I know this is real, and they know it's real too. But I think that we're at a point now to where certainly in this year of 2020, anything is possible. And I think now this is a soft disclosure, and I think that's why they're allowing these types of shows with this Louis, what's his name, Elizondo?
Luis Elizondo,
Yeah.
I believe, from TV Stars Academy that Tom DeLonge operates.
Yeah. And Skinwalker, the show, the Skinwalker Ranch thing and all that, I really believe that they are preparing the public for this time that is really near and upon us.
One, I don't know what your guys' opinion is on this, but I think COVID, the way people have reacted and all of the craziness that's gone on over COVID, which over 99% of people have recovered from, it just goes to show you, could the world handle the knowledge that there could be beings or people either surveying us with technologies beyond our means, and we can't really do anything about it? Are we actually ready to handle that?
No.
If COVID is causing all this craziness?
No, we're nowhere close.
Imagine the amount of toilet paper we would need.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
It
crazy,
makes me
man.
wonder what would happen. I don't think they'll ever do full disclosure personally,
No.
unless there's like some type of irrefutable mass sighting. But it seems like they're going to let people research themselves, and as Bill said, put little clips out here and there, kind of slip things out, and maybe some of us will be more accepting of it at first. So maybe the mass hysteria won't be as bad when if something finally happens where we can't hide it anymore. But I'm very interested in it. I research it at least an hour a day. So I guess only time will tell. They did mention, the government did mention back in, I think, July, that they were going to reveal something about materials, off-world materials, not of Earth, that were discovered. And that was reported on Fox News, CNN. I think a government spokesperson put that out, but they still haven't revealed what that's all about. I don't know if you guys have heard anything further about that.
No, I've not heard anything further about it. But I tell you, I was reading through the Artemis Accord earlier on. That's the NASA document for pretty much legalizing the legal system and everything in space, because we're going back to the moon and they're looking at going to Mars. And I had to have a little giggle because it said we'll be totally transparent, but we'll talk about everything we see. And like you said, they'll tell us what they want us to know. But it might be even easier for them to kind of bring aliens into the equation when more and more people are going up into space and more people are seeing things firsthand, you know?
You mentioned Mars, and Elon Musk is, of course, the guy that's.
Don't get him started.
Oh, I
Devin.
love Elon
Yeah, well,
Musk.
he's creating that Mars program, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know if you guys heard this, but Musk said back this past summer that he believes aliens were the ones actually involved with the pyramid creation. And I found it funny that he got such a backlash for saying that, like he was a complete idiot. But this guy is one of the richest people in the world, actually developing a program to go into outer space. And the biggest people that were against him was the Egyptian government. But like, we're supposed to believe like Egyptian government tourism officials over a guy that's like planning to colonize Mars.
And
I don't know. I
you,
take it if he says the aliens built the pyramids and he was serious.
no,
I would
I'm
take
with
that
you, dude. I
picture.
mean, listen, when you look at those pyramids and they tell us the way that they're meant to have been built, it just doesn't make sense.
No,
So,
no, and I've been saying that for many years. I agree with that as well.
definitely. But like you say there, and I mean that kind of sums up today's world, really, isn't it? You know, people are attacked viciously online for thinking outside the box. You know, that's a problem, the way people treat each other, right?
For sure. And you have to think too, Musk, if he's planning this Mars colonization project, that he would be privy to certain information from the government that regular people wouldn't know, because this is such a big project to colonize a planet.
Well, he's in bed with NASA. He does deals with them. He puts the astronauts up. He launches their
Yes.
satellites. So he's definitely sworn in. And Bill loves him. Bill absolutely adores Elon Musk.
Devin, that's why I said you don't get him started, because I'm not an Elon Musk fan, but Kev is. Kev loves him. So you're speaking his language when you talk Elon Musk.
Kev, I think we need to create a new Elon Musk fan group and have Bill the official president.
I think that'd be hilarious.
I
Yes.
think
I don't think that would work very well. That's for
You
sure.
would agree with Elon about one thing, Bill. He said that the lockdown, he said this on the Joe Rogan podcast, that the lockdown was not a smart way of dealing with this situation at all. And whether you like him or not, the guy is very intelligent. So
Yeah.
you got to give him some credibility saying stuff like that.
No, I do agree with that. Where he and I differ is he doesn't believe in God, so he doesn't have any faith. His girlfriend is a Satanist. So that's where I go off the tracks with them. But I can't take away from his intellect, certainly not, and his ability to make money, that's for sure. But I'll tell you, Devin, in my opinion, I think this, and what he says about the pyramids, I'm in absolute agreement with him. But this goes way, way back. I mean, we're talking things like Project Serpo, which the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind supposedly is based off of, to where there has been an exchange program going on for many, many years, to where military personnel are being taken off world to other places in exchange for these other types of beings that are coming here. And I could see how that is absolutely possible and plausible. And furthermore, you know, I've read that's what where Spielberg got the concept of Close Encounters from.
I'm wondering, Bill, I interviewed Linda Moulton Howe
Brilliant lady.
not too long ago, yeah, and she's an expert in the cattle mutilation field and animal mutilation.
Linda's my big
seem to
scalp,
be-
Devin. She's my big scalp. You had your Paul Hellier. I've had Linda Moulton Howe. She's my definite top UFO person I've had on.
Well, yeah, and I was just wondering Bill's opinion of who is responsible for the mutilations, because Linda truly believes that it has to be alien. She's just the way that the blood is sucked out of them and the way that the cuts are so clean,
Yeah.
and the way that often they're found on their backs with like no traces of humans around to do such things. But there are a group of people that believe that these mutilations are done by Satanists. So Bill brought up Satanists, and I'm wondering
Yeah.
if he thinks what he thinks of that theory.
Well, I think I agree with Linda that this could not possibly be human. There's no way. Now, I will say this, and I've researched this as well, and I can believe it, that there are, if in fact this SERPO program exists, and Linda herself has spoken about this in the past, if that's true, then I do believe our technological leaps have taken place over the last 100 years due to this joint working partnership between certain factions of government and I'm talking black projects that are intermingling with these people from somewhere else. And perhaps, and I have, researched this extensively, that some of these people in the shadows, in the black ops government shadows, in the alphabet agencies, are working in conjunctions and perhaps being a part of these teams that are going, and whether it is in the disc UFOs or rectangles or whatever it may be, the boomerangs, whatever it may be, the flying triangles, whether it's that or helicopters, I think that these otherworldly beings are doing this, and these people in the shadow government are assisting them and overseeing it. Furthermore, I think that it's very plausible to say that these very same people, through these agreements that were made in exchange for technology, are also overseeing and assisting in abduction of human beings that's been going on for quite a while now. So I think these are the same players that, for whatever reasons, are doing these things. And boy, we could make a whole show out of that alone. But I do believe what Linda says is true. I agree with her 100%.
And where I became, I've always been interested in it, but last summer, the summer of 2019, there was a string of these mutilations in Oregon with some prized bulls that were worth thousands of dollars. And I was reading the police reports and the comments from sheriffs that investigated the situation fully, and they jokingly said it has to be UFOs, but at the same time they weren't joking.
Yeah.
Because they researched every other plausible explanation, and they just couldn't. It sounds ridiculous to say it has to be something from out of this world with technology greater than ours, but that was the best explanation they could come up with. As you can see with this animal that's being shown with the blood sucked out of it.
Yeah. And precision cuts. I mean, you can't. So if this were a group of Satanists in the field and they're having their ritual, and yes, they do sacrifice animals, I'm aware of that. But you are not going to have surgical precision on these types of cuts, and then all the blood's drained out. In some instances, the tongue is gone, eyeballs, genitals, whatever it may be, they're cored out, of the animal. No, I don't buy that for 1 second. I just don't believe that it is of human hand, not technology, not human technology that we know of anyway.
Well, over in Europe, during the summer there was a spate of, it actually happened to horses this time. And it was across France, I believe, some in Belgium, and I believe some in Germany. But it was multiple countries anyway. I'm with you guys. I think there's something definitely otherworldly. I can't put my finger on what it is. Our mind obviously goes towards genetics, things like that. But who knows what we're dealing with here, Devin?
Yeah, and one of these Oregon mutilations that happened too, where I think there was 5 in one night that were done. It was on like a 500-acre ranch, and there was no evidence of like tire marks. And the rancher said, like, we do have cameras at various parts of the ranch, and nothing was caught on camera. There was absolutely no sign of human activity, and it was in such a secluded area that it would be almost impossible to do this without leaving some type of tracks.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Travis, I know you're chomping at the bit here to get in on this.
I'm making my notes down through here, things I wanted to try to come back and address. First of all, I was going to address Project Serpo. I'd really like to find out about that, because there's some people I would really honestly like to trade out for some aliens and honestly just get them off the world and bring in something new. I was going to ask, Kev mentioned about the spate of horse mutilations there in France, and of course we're very familiar with what goes on in the U.S. I do love when we have folks on the show who are from outside the continental U.S. borders and things like that. So, Devin, I was wondering, are there mutilation incidences in Canada, in the area that you are?
I haven't researched that too much, but I know there has been in Alberta, the province of Alberta, where it's a big farming province. There's been some legitimate cases that the RCMP have investigated and come up with no answers. So around my particular area, not that I'm aware of, but it's possible. But there have been some in Canada for sure, particularly in Alberta, where there are a lot of cattle.
Now, one of the things I was curious about, because we kind of just segued right into the paranormal, what got you interested in the beginning in the paranormal and the supernatural, and specifically UFOs?
Well, UFOs, actually, it was around 2012. I saw a news report from CBC, which is the big network here in Canada, and they have a credible news channel, and they did a report saying that the Canadian government admits that there's more UFO sightings than ever, and some of them really can't be explained, but they are not going to invest government money into researching it. Instead, they're going to let private citizens and scientists and people that have their own interests research it themselves. And I actually asked Paul Hellyer about that when I interviewed him, but that's what sparked my interest, because that in that news report, the government of Canada was basically saying, yes, there are unidentified flying objects in our sky, some that we really don't know what they are, but we're not going to research it. We're just going to let private citizens research it. And when I asked Paul Hellyer about that, who was the former Canadian Minister of National Defense, he said, there's no way that there's objects that aren't announcing themselves in our airspace that the government knows about, that they're actually not researching, because some people will say, oh, well, they've been seen for all these years. They're not, you can't really consider them a threat. They haven't really done anything threatening, but just because they haven't necessarily done anything doesn't mean that they're not a threat. If they're in our airspace, they're not announcing themselves. We have known from military officials in the U.S. that they have played around with nuclear silos in the U.S. before, which is kind of scary that they apparently launched or they turned on something that could have actually caused a war. But luckily, nothing came of it. They were able to act fast. I'm not an expert in that, but I did. There's a documentary.
What you're saying is true.
Yeah, UFOs and nukes. There's a documentary about it. Robert Hastings, who I think is a former military official, and there was a whole press thing in Washington where numerous military officials came forward about there's something about nuclear silos where there's more sightings of UFOs for whatever reason. I don't know what your theories are about it. Maybe they don't want us to blow ourselves up.
I think that's probably exactly what it's all about. I mean, Rendlesham Forest over here, it's coming up for its 40th anniversary. And at the time, because of the NATO kind of treaties, America were not meant to be storing nukes on British soil. And we had the big sighting there, and years later we found out that was where America was. It was a silo. It was all top secret, but the UFO it came down, and I'm like you. I mean, sometimes I laugh, and it's almost like they look at us like children playing with matches. And they come down and kind of just stamp it all out, but maybe they use it for an energy source. I have no idea,
I agree,
really.
Kev.
You know?
That's another facet. I think that it is probably fueling a propulsion system, and so there are several factors in this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, Travis, I mean, if they can travel through space and time, which means they're probably multi-dimensional craft, okay? I mean, maybe we don't even know the science that's involved in why they're going near nuclear sites, you know?
Well, and I think, you know, the other problem is we are using a human perspective to try to grasp what is obviously a non-biological, non-human life form. Their thought process and what they do and why they do it may be so far off the norm of what we're thinking. I do find it interesting when you look at UFO sightings, you know, of course, they've been throughout history, but for the modern era, it did begin during World War II, a massive war and a massive aerial war. So, and the Foo Fighters there, and then, of course, you know, going back to the Roswell crash, again, the home of the 509th, which dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Again, there is this direct correlation between war and nuclear energy that we have all of a sudden been trying to harness as an evolving human race.
And also for the threat part, I heard Luis Elizondo, who Bill brought up earlier, say that UFOs in our airspace is kind of like we wake up and there's footprints all over our house, nothing stolen, nobody hurt, but something has been there. We didn't ask it to come. We don't know what they did, but they intruded. So
it's also it's ridiculous, you know, Devin, what the Canadian kind of government are saying about how they know about it, but they don't research it, because if it's unidentified, then you'd have to at least go up and check what it is, because it could be the enemy, it could be like Russia, it could be China, it could be anyone invading. So it's ridiculous to think that they don't even make that initial kind of contact to go and see what's happening, you know, just basic military.
I think there's a lot more to that Men in Black movie that people would look at and say, you know, oh, that's a comedy and all, but there's actually some truth to, I believe there is like this big board on a wall where they know that certain ones are coming in from certain places. I just find it very hard to believe in today, especially with the technology that we have today, that these types of things could come into not only American airspace, but international airspace. And nobody's going to bat an eye, and they're not going to check this out or know what this is or where it's coming. I just find that hard to believe.
Well, let's go back to what Devin said. I mean, the statement by the Canadian officials is that, yes, they are aware that there are aircraft in the airspace. They're just not going to invest money into researching it. They're leaving that up to the private individuals. Well, the unstated obvious fact there is they're not putting money into researching it because they already know what it is and who it is and why they're
correct. Yeah, correct. And to go back to the mutilation thing for a second as well, I hate to say this, but you know, I've done extensive studies in it, and unfortunately, I believe it's true. There are the rare cases to where there are human mutilations, and some of those took place in South America, Brazil and Argentina and other places, and very similar to the cattle, the humans also had the blood drained out and tongues missing, eyes and genitals and things of that nature. So it's rare compared to the cattle mutilations, but unfortunately, I
not
believe
rare
that
enough,
it does happen.
Yeah, not rare enough.
Correct.
Yeah, it happens over here as well from time to time.
And Kev,
you know?
think there's in America, I think there's 2,000 people a day that go missing. So I mean, that's a very large number. And then when you put that on the world scale, I wonder what that number is daily in our world of people that go missing.
You know, Devin, like when you were a kid, when you were growing up, I mean, were you open-minded then? Were you kind of like asking these kind of questions, or was it just that later moment in life that really made you kind of pause and think?
Honestly, it was that news report that sparked my interest. I was never interested at all in UFOs. Paranormal, yes. I've always been interested in that from whenever I can remember. But Bill mentioned the Brazilian reservoir case for the human mutilation.
Yeah.
The scary part about that, it was similar, right? His anus was removed, I believe.
Yeah.
The blood was sucked out. And he actually died when they did the autopsy from pain.
Whoa.
So he actually died from the pain of having this done to him while he was still alive.
It's horrible.
So
that's
absolutely
horrible.
scary.
Did you watch the recent series about Skinwalker Ranch, Devin, with the mutilation that they may be prevented from taking place on the ranch?
The most recent thing I've seen about that is the movie that was released that George Knapp was involved with. I forget the guy's name, but they also appeared on Joe Rogan together. He's also done a movie about his name isn't coming to me.
Yeah,
but
I know
Is
the
it
guy you mean.
Bigelow?
It's not. It's the filmmaker.
I see, okay.
I know the guy you mean. I can't remember his name either.
I'll look it up right now.
Because he made the film with the guy from Area 51 as well. His name's escaping me
Bob
now.
Lazar.
Bob Lazar, yeah.
Bob Lazar, okay.
Yeah, he made that film as well.
Yeah, let me look up his name.
Yeah, how rude of us. We enjoy his work, but I can't remember his name. Travis,
I found the Skinwalker Ranch movie disappointing, actually, because there was nothing really new in it that you can't already find online.
well, there's a documentary that was on History Channel. Season 1 finished recently, and I highly recommend that because there's a lot of stuff in there. And I tell you, it's under new ownership now, so it seems like just like we're hearing more from the governments, they're showing us more of the activity that's going on there. And I think, like Bill, it all ties into the whole disclosure that's going on.
It's Jeremy Corbet, the guy that produced that.
Yeah.
I don't know who I've heard the name, but I don't know anything
He's
about
a good
him.
documentary maker, man. He is. He's
Yes.
good. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll kind of shift gears for a moment, Devin, right? Because I know Bill will be really wanting to get into your wrestling as well.
UFO interview. It just turned.
We could stay on this topic for hours.
Probably we'll come back to
Well,
it.
my fans are gonna like this because if I post this on my channel as well, there are a group of UFO people that have been saying, "Give us more UFO content," so they'll like that.
Well, hang on. Before we shift gears, how about the paranormal? Have you ever had any paranormal experience, ghosts?
I did, yes, and that's what made me 100% believer. I was always interested in it, but when after high school, I actually turned down. I had a Division I wrestling scholarship offer from the University of Buffalo, and another one from Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, which is the top amateur wrestling school in Canada, because not only did they at that time, I don't know if they still do, compete in the Canadian circuit, but they also were allowed to compete in the NAIA league in the US. But I wanted to be a pro wrestler. So instead of doing the smart thing of taking my scholarships, and now looking back at it, I didn't know at the time, but WWE actually scouts Division I wrestling. But I thought, okay, I'm just going to go straight into pro wrestling. That's always what I wanted to do. So I moved from Ottawa, which, as I told Bill off camera, it's about 3 hours from Syracuse, New York. And I moved to Calgary, which for the American fans out there is close to Montana. So I moved a good distance across the country to train with the Hart family, which is a famous wrestling family, and so many excellent wrestlers came out of the dungeon, where it's called, which was the basement room. We didn't train in a ring; it was mats in a basement, and it was very, very tough training. But when I came there, I didn't have anywhere to stay at first, so a friend of my parents' friend lived in Calgary, and they said I could stay there well, I found a place to rent. So when I've always liked Ouija boards, as I talked with Bill before, on my own show on the Hannibal TV. And there was a son that lived with his parents at this house. They also had a daughter who had moved out. And the son was also interested in the paranormal. So I remember it was the Halloween of 2001. I went out and I got a Ouija board, and the basement had like a, we both lived, there was 2 rooms in the basement, a bathroom and like a living room area. And in the living room area, there was a TV, and that was like a TV room. So we had the Ouija board on the table in there. And anytime I've used a Ouija board in the past, sometimes it did communicate, but nothing. I always thought it was just my friends moving it. There was nothing really big that happened. So I was kind of joking around. So when we got it moving, it kept saying no, it didn't want to talk. So I started getting rude with it, and being kind of aggressive, like, get us to talk. And it kept saying no. And I think it was the 5th time that it said no. Oh, by the way, we were alone in the house this day. His parents were gone somewhere. The 5th time it said no, the power went out in the house at the exact moment that it said no. There was no, and we had the TV on and the lights were on in the house, and all the power went off at that exact time. So there was just no coincidence there. And that was like almost confirmation to me. But a couple nights later was the real confirmation. We stopped playing with it then. And then when we told his parents were furious. And they said, Devin, you're going to have to, if you bring that back in the house, you're not going to be able to stay here. Keep the thing in your car. So they almost knew something was up with the house. But a couple nights later, I go to the bathroom, and where my room was, you had to walk down the hall past the living room a little bit to use the bathroom. And I opened the door, and this is like in November. There's a street light coming in, shining into the living room. So I can faintly see the rocking chair in the living room move. So it's November. There's no windows open. So I see it move, and I'm like, am I imagining this? So I turn on the light, and it stops moving. And I'm like, okay, maybe I was imagining it. I turn the light back off, and it starts moving again. And then I turn it on again, and it stops moving. And then I turned it off, and it started moving again. So I'm like, okay, I'm leaving this light on for the rest of the night. And I'll be honest, I moved out about a week and a half later because I felt very uncomfortable, and that kind of freaked me out. I wasn't as knowledgeable about the paranormal then. Now I would love to live in a haunted house, but I was very disturbed, and I felt uncomfortable in that house.
For good reason.
Moving out too fast. In a place I couldn't afford. So ultimately I had to come back to my parents for about a year. And during that year, I trained with Jacques Rougeau, who was the Mountie in WWE, while I saved up more money and then came back and trained another 2 years in Calgary. And I was wrestling at those times too. But that was the incident, the only paranormal experience I've had. But there's no way that rocking chair could have moved by anything but a spirit. Yes, okay, maybe the Ouija board could have been a coincidence, but
it's a summoning tool. Yeah, that's that. I mean, when you're fooling with stuff like that, I mean, that is giving an opening and permission for the devil to send demons in and come in and torment. So yes, that's all valid. What you were feeling, very real. The power going out, all that stuff. You better believe it. That is all real. And I'd have to say, you've had a recent supernatural, I would say supernatural divine experience at your grandmother's funeral. You sent those photographs to me, and I do believe that, in my opinion, I believe that it was angels around you and your grandmother as well, just giving you comfort and confirmation that she's okay and she's with you and she's comforting you. Again, I believe that 1,000,000%.
And if anyone wants to look at those pictures, what Bill is talking about is at my grandmother's burial, we took about 60 pictures, and about 8 of those pictures, there was orbs around me. And in 2 of the pictures, the orbs were green. And her last name was Greenwell because she was on my mother's side of the family.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Orbs
that
are
is
amazing.
unusual.
Yeah, big time, man. That's awesome.
Confirmation, yes. And I pray, Devin, that every time you look at those photographs, you'll have comfort in knowing that your grandmother actually was there with those angels, giving you that level of comfort and confirmation. So it makes me feel good, and it did when I looked at the pictures, that it gave me a good feeling in knowing that I truly believe that it was divine and it was her way of just letting you know that she was there with you.
And I actually went back there and I took more pictures just by myself at night. And I was hoping that I would get some more orbs or anything, but I didn't. So
Yeah.
on that particular day, that happened for whatever reason, and it was comforting because you told me that, and I actually sent the pictures to 2 paranormal investigators, and they both said that it was very unusual and to have the green orbs in particular in those 2 pictures, that was even more unusual. So that was I don't even really want to talk about it because I was so devastated over her loss. But at least, and I had as I was telling you off camera, I didn't really have a good experience at the funeral either.
Yeah.
Due to, I won't even get into it, but
Yeah.
to see those pictures after, it made me not regret going.
I pray that you will always have a good feeling when you look at them and have comfort in knowing that you really did have that level of confirmation. And as I have said to you previously, I really believe that the day will come, and I'm certainly praying it for you, that you will have a wonderful dream of your grandmother that will be so real. It's like she's coming to visit you in the dream, and you'll have more instances of confirmation, because I don't pretend to know all the answers, but I do believe that God does allow our loved ones to come back and check in with us and on us from time to time. So I fully believe that that will be the case with you as well. And Travis, I know you're chomping at the bit again, so I'll shut up and let you ask Devin some questions.
No, I always enjoy watching you and Kev turn into fanboys.
Come on, man.
I'll say one more thing about the paranormal, though, before Travis jumps in. It's that I also want to do more investigations on my channel. I rented a haunted house, an alleged haunted house, for 3 days back in January, hoping to experience something, but I didn't. But I did a little video about it. Hannibal Investigates Tucker House. People can look that up on the internet. COVID has a lot of these haunted houses you can rent off closed right now. I've tried to rent more of these historical houses, but I really want some experiences like Bill has had. I know Bill's run into some pretty evil spirits, but just for some confirmation for me that there is something after life, I would really want that. I'm not that religious. I'm a spiritual person, but I would really like some, even if it's an evil being. I
don't want that for you. No way. I bind and rebuke that. You don't want that. And what happens is, in the evil stuff, and Travis, I promise I'll shut up.
No, this is your show.
When it comes to evil stuff, Devin, you won't see it coming. It will not come to you and say, here I am, I'm going to disrupt your life or torment you or cause you ruin. These things operate in the shadows. So you may not think that you've had an experience and then all of a sudden you start to feel a presence and then things start to go wrong in your life, and that is a demon that is at work. And so I pray against that, because I want you to have that type of experience. I don't want anybody to have that experience. And so in doing the work that I do, I deal with this stuff just about every day. And so I know how the devil and his demons work, and their mission is to kill, rob, and destroy. And they do it all covertly. So it is divide and conquer tactics, and it's bully tactics as well, because what they try to do is get the person into fear. So if they could get the person through confusion, and it might be a series of events that may take place, and the person's going, wow, what is this? What's going on here? And then the confusion leads to fear. And once fear manifests, oh man, they're like sharks. They see the blood in the water and they go for it, and they feed off of that. So, and furthermore, when a person, and I've come across this many times when people were fully possessed, when a person is in that level of fear, the trauma is off the charts, then secretions of blood, and it's called adrenochrome. These secretions will come out through the adrenal glands and the pineal gland, and demons, they love it. They eat it like candy, and they will not leave until someone like me, God working through me. It's not that I'm anything. It's just that God works through me to help people. It won't leave until someone like me comes along to get rid of it. They just absolutely, and then the person, it's like they've got the black cloud over their head. Nothing goes right. There's always a problem, a situation, a drama, and never an answer. And they find that they're just in this endless storm of one terrible thing after another. And the whole time it has been a demonic attack that has been launched against them in the shadows. So I pray for you that you never experience anything like that. I pray that you experience God's angels surrounding you and having divine supernatural experiences. That would be great, but I don't want the evil for you, that's for sure. And Travis, I know I'm going to shut up now and let you come in.
It's your show, man. I'm just I know you want to ask
questions.
I pop in every now and then with some questions.
Are you in Las Vegas right now, Travis? What is that?
I wish I were. That is the backdrop. But Las Vegas is the backdrop. But,
Sin City for a religious podcast.
He's in Las Vegas, Kentucky right now.
I'm waiting for Bill to take one of those guitars out and start playing us a tune.
I'm going to send you a clip. I'll send you a clip of me playing a little bit.
He's good. And I will say this, I have had, and Bill knows, some experiences with paranormal. I don't consider myself a paranormal investigator as much as I am interested in the paranormal and researching. Most of the what I would call haunting encounters that I have had, I would classify as more residual types of encounters. One location in particular, which Bill is familiar with, when I was working on the documentary film about the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, we did spent a lot of time in a place called Lake and State Mental Hospital, which is no longer there. But I do believe, with every fiber of my being, that something very, very nefarious and demonic attached itself to me back in the early 2000s, and it was not until Bill performed a deliverance for me a few years ago that I was fully rid of that attachment and that spiritual attack and the negativity in my life. So I agree with Bill. While I agree with you in having those experiences of that residual type of haunting, that there is a life after death, because I do think that is a huge question that all of us want answered in some form or fashion. The demonic side is something, and it was one of those things for us. We stumbled on it. We didn't know what we were getting into. We didn't know the backstory on the property. We didn't know anything about it. We were very open and very susceptible to those types of attacks. Now, having said that, I want to go back real quickly and do two things, and I know we want to probably talk about other things besides the paranormal, although I do love this topic. Your interview with Travis Walton, when you did that interview, I've seen several interviews with him. I've never had the opportunity to interview him.
That took 2 years to get, by the way.
Yeah, I would say so. that event is almost 50 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. It was early 1970. I want to say 73, but I may be off on that. But every interview that I've seen with him, he's never changed his story one single time on what transpired. But my question is, from a psychological, almost PTSD standpoint, how did he handle talking about it now as he was going back and reliving it and retelling the story?
He's still uncomfortable talking about it. Still uncomfortable. And I'll explain to you, he's a strange guy. He's a very strange guy. As I mentioned, I've never actually told this story, so I'll tell it now. I was very, very, very mad at him that day because, as I said, I worked on this for 2 years. I had interviews in Phoenix, and then I was driving to where Travis is right now, Las Vegas, to cover a convention called the Cauliflower Alley Club Wrestling Convention for the Hannibal TV. So Travis is in Snowflake, Arizona, which is a bit of a detour when you're driving from Phoenix to Vegas up in the mountains, really out in the middle of nowhere. And he said he would do the interview with me if I went to his town. And then he told me to rent these specific cabins where Muhammad Ali once had a training camp. So they weren't cheap. They were more expensive than a hotel room. Well, first of all, it's kind of cool. That whole town, there's alien statues everywhere. The town has really embraced the whole Travis Walton story. They still have they have the phone booth where he was where he called for help after he was dropped back off with some giant alien statues around it as like a tourist attraction. And it is the actual phone booth. But we made all the arrangements. I booked this cabin and everything. We talked to him the morning of the interview. It was supposed to be, I think, at like 2 in the afternoon. And then he doesn't show up at 2.
Wow.
Then he doesn't answer his phone at all the day of. And we had this plan for a long time. And I'm starting to get really, like, Bill probably knows, my wrestling character might have an angry side, but it's a bit of my real side. I was, like, losing it.
Bruiser Brody style.
Yeah, because I could have used that time to interview somebody else. So finally, around 6:30 p.m., which is hours after the interview was supposed to take place, he calls back and says, sorry, I was confused on the time of the interview and the location of the interview.
Wow.
And it's like, you chose the damn location.
Yeah.
And then he says, can you meet me at this bar in town in the parking lot and drive me to where the cabin is? Because I don't know where the cabins are. And so it was very confusing.
So you picked him up from a bar.
Yeah, I drive to this bar, and again, he was about 45 minutes late. And he finally shows up in this old truck, which if you watch, I think we're in front of the truck at the very start. I think it's the same truck he had when he was doing the logging. It's a very, like, when you see this truck, it almost has an energy to it. Yeah, that's the truck in behind him. And it doesn't even, it's one of these trucks that you gotta like start it like 10 times to get it going.
Wow.
But yeah, he meets me at this bar finally. And at this time, it's like 9:30 p.m.
Wow.
And he drives to the cabin. Maybe he was feeling nervous about coming to this cabin with this wrestler that's much bigger. He's not a big man. But again, I had been talking to him. I showed him my channel. Wasn't as big as it is now, but I had credibility to me. So he came. But to answer your question, he was very, very nervous. Always nervous. And the funny thing is, he shows up with 3 books and 2 DVDs. But he had already sent me them because part of the deal was I told him I'll buy your books, I'll buy your DVDs, and I'll really familiarize myself with your story before I interview. So it's like, did he also forget And then I was wondering, is he going to give me the books and DVDs? But he didn't. He brought them back with him.
Devin,
So he's a very strange man.
And I agree with that. I made an appearance with him in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, at the Phenomenology. I think it was in 2015, somewhere around there. And they had him. His table was next to mine, and we hadn't met prior to that. And yeah, I'm friendly with everybody, but I don't speak to people if I get a certain vibe. You know, I try to mind my own business. But I don't know how we started speaking, but it was he, like you're describing, very, very nervous, withdrawn, odd, strange. And I went out of my way to be nice to him. I really did. And we ended up having a semblance of a conversation. We'd never talked about his experiences or mine. We just had general conversation. But I understand what you're saying there. It was very, very bizarre.
You know, maybe if I'd been taken on board a spaceship and been probed back in the day, I'd be worried about meeting a guy Devin's size in a cabin in the woods. You know what I'm saying?
The cabin was his choice. That's a strange thing. He was very specific. We want to do it here in this cabin. And then his excuse was he couldn't find the cabin and I would need to drive him, which was just even more bizarre because this is a small town where he's lived all of his life.
It makes you wonder though
where this place is where he told me to go.
It makes you wonder if it could be a number of things. Maybe he's like had other things happen. But if he had, with him being abducted, maybe he's got multiple personality now, because that could be traumatic enough to cause you to have something like that. So that would explain why it was like speaking to two different people, perhaps, Devin, you know?
And you explained to Travis about, did I find him, like, he did seem disturbed telling the story, and even after we did talk, and he drove us to where the phone booth was, and in a separate video, people can search it up, Travis shows me the phone booth. He did talk to me for quite a while after at the phone booth, and he was very nervous about it. And like, as I said, I want to have a ghost encounter. I would love to have a ET encounter. And I was almost talking like he was almost lucky to have had this experience, but he says he would have never wanted this to happen. He was greatly disturbed by it, and he would not want it to happen again. He did have a sighting in 2014 that he did talk about in the interview, but never another abduction. But my cameraman that was there was not a believer, and he's not even a cameraman. He actually worked for the Canadian government at the time. He's retired now. As far as and he knew he like dealt with he worked for the Ministry of Transport, so he knew a thing or two about airspace and transportation. And he said he's not necessarily a UFO believer, but he told me after, he said, I don't believe this man is lying. I don't know what he experienced, but I do not believe this man is lying.
Yeah, something definitely. Yeah, I believe something happened, and I think that it is. I'll say this, and again, I haven't seen him since then. I wish him well, but he's somebody that I would suggest to, whether it be me or someone else, to perform a spiritual deliverance over, because he really needs that. He is. There's something definitely there that is keeping him from moving forward in life. That's for sure, in my opinion.
I hope to have a part 2 with him one of these days, but you know what? He hasn't responded to me since. To go back to what a strange guy he is. You'd think 600, 700,000 views, whatever it is, that he would at least give me a reply, but he's not responded to me since that interview.
So if there was anyone out there you could interview on your podcast, who would be the next one you would love to talk to, you know?
Tom DeLonge from Blink 182, who's the founder of To the Stars Academy, and he has been privy to a lot of inside information because he has invested a lot of his own money into the research of UFOs, and he's one of the people that leaked those military videos before they were the government only put them out because they were already leaked. That's one of the reasons why the government released them. But but Tom knows more than a lot of people. Robert Bigelow, of course, knows a lot too, and Tom has talked to him. So maybe Tom and Robert would be the top two, but I would say Tom even above Robert because he's spoken to a more variety of people, and he seems a little bit more open to talking about stuff than Bigelow knows a lot, obviously. And there's another multi-billionaire, one of the richest people in the world, that's done his own investigations and was actually contracted by the government to investigate UFOs with all of his resources.
And they contacted me, Devin, Bigelow's foundation, Dr. Eric Davis from NIDS. They were investigating my case. They were a part of the things that were taking place for quite a while. So yeah, when you say Robert Bigelow, that resonates with me.
He had Skinwalker Ranch for years too. He and they mentioned this in the movie, and I was disappointed because there wasn't much about Bigelow in this movie, but he had it for many years, and he was just paying for his own investigations to be done there. And many people were saying that the reason he ultimately sold it was because he found the answers he was looking for. But he hasn't really released his answers publicly. They had teased that in that movie, some of these answers would be answered, but there's not much in the way of answers.
Devin, you must watch this new TV show, the Hunt for Skinwalker, the Curse of Skinwalker on History.
Curse of Skinwalker.
Yeah, you're gonna love it, Devin. You really will. Travis, you've seen that, right?
I have.
I mean, that is sensational, is it not? And I mean, that's jam-packed with things they catch on camera. They've got Linda Moulton Howe in it. And the new owner, the new guy, what's his name? Brandon Fugel.
That's it, yeah.
Very, very optimistic about what we're going to find out from there.
I mean,
What's your theory on that, guys? Like, what is that? For people that don't know, we'll let one of you explain it because
Travis,
I'm not an expert. I'm only an amateur researcher into Skinwalker. But for people that are maybe watching this and don't know about Skinwalker, maybe one of you guys could explain briefly what it is that goes on in that hot spot, and maybe Bill or Travis could give us your theories on what exactly you guys think is happening there.
Go ahead, Travis.
Well, I mean, Skinwalker Ranch is a piece of property in Utah. Has a very long history of supernatural occurrences, dating back to, of course, Native Americans. Of course, the term Skinwalker referring to a particular type of spiritual manifestation in Native American mythology. Shapeshifter. Mm-hmm. Lots of UFO sightings, cattle mutilations, portals, people being able to see into what appears to be other dimensions, other worlds, hauntings, just a lot of bizarre occurrences.
Demonic activity. Beams of light, shafts of light in the middle of the desert, just shining in the middle of the night. And what's really interesting about this TV show, Devin, is they brought in an aerospace engineer, an aerospace aeronautic engineer from University of Alabama. I think his name is Travis also, but I think he's from University of Alabama.
Travis, what? No.
What?
I was about to say Travis
Not
Walton.
Travis.
No,
no, not that one.
I can't think of his
A
name.
lot of Travises today.
A lot of Travises today.
Yeah.
And they set up cameras throughout the property. They send up weather balloons with aeronautical measuring devices, recording, video, and they capture a lot of what appears to be legitimate activity during this TV series. UFOs in the sky. They capture one instance, and Kev was talking about it, of a possible cattle mutilation in the works. And in the upper quadrant of the screen, you actually see a disc-shaped dark object hovering above this animal as it begins to spasm and go into these convulsions and then hit the ground. I said the beams of light out of nowhere. I was trying to think, there were a lot of other things they captured in the first season.
And again, things that are under the ground.
Yes.
And, I fully believe that there is some type of facility under the ground there.
I mean, look at
again, is it a joint thing? I don't know. But, and Kev, I see you got Travis up there. What's his last name?
Travis Taylor. This is
That
the
is
gentleman in the
Travis
middle.
Taylor,
But look
yeah.
at the level of kind of science they're putting into this, Devin. It's really, really, it's top-notch stuff, brother. It is.
I'll have to look it up. I don't know if we get it here in Canada, but maybe they'll be somewhere online to watch.
Hypothetically, you could use a VPN, you know, and they just pretend you're in America with your IP address and get it on the History Channel website. Hypothetically, of course, you know.
He's not encouraging it. He's just tossing it out there. as
Yes,
possible.
exactly. You know, just an afterthought. But Travis, I think you still had one more question because that was good. That Travis Walton though, because that's one of my favorite UFO stories. I must admit.
Well, mine too, and it speaks volumes because I mentioned this, you know, in our shows when I was interviewing the eyewitnesses of the Mothman sighting, which took place in the late '60s. They were very reticent; they didn't want to talk about it. It took a lot of coaxing. It took a lot of developing relationships and friendships to get them to talk about it. A lot of that had to do with the ridicule that they faced when they were originally coming forward and explaining what they saw. And I've seen, like I said, early interviews with Travis up through probably the early 2000s was the last Travis Walton interview that I saw. But, you know, throughout the years, he's never varied on what he said happened. And he's always seemed to be suffering from some form of PTSD in some way, that he's still very traumatized by what took place. But my last question from the paranormal standpoint was just, you know, I mentioned Mothman. Kev is, you know, in Scotland around Loch Ness. Besides Sasquatch and Bigfoot, any other cryptids in the Canadian territories up there?
Oh yes, I mean there's lots. I was more when I was young, from like 4 years old. I was most interested in the sea monsters, and I still am to a certain extent. But I'm now most interested in UFOs because those are the things that could actually change the world.
Yeah.
There's Ogopogo, of course, in the Okanagan Lake. There's one in a lake in the Ottawa Valley, close to here, Mussy, the muskrat lake monster. There's one in Winnipeg. I forget what it's called, but there's tons of alleged lake monster creatures in Canada, but the Ogopogo is the most. And then there's that one that's in Kelowna, around Kelowna, BC. And then there's another one. There's Vancouver. Then there's Vancouver Island, which is off the coast of Vancouver. There's another plesiosaur supposedly around there as well. But yeah, I've seen a lot of videos related to that online, but it seems like there hasn't been much as far as Nessie. I think where my first I actually have relatives in Scotland, and when I was young we visited. It's funny because I visited when I was a baby. The oldest I was like 6 when I visited there, and then like by the time I was 10 I was extremely interested in the Loch Ness Monster, but they never took me back. By the time I was actually interested in it. But
you're talking Kev's language again, Devin. You're right up his alley again there.
I was brought up the first 17 years of life in Fort Augustus, and that's right on the mouth of Loch Ness. So growing up with it, you kind of become used to it. And now that I'm older and I look back, you know, I'm really lucky to have grown up where I did, but I've never seen it myself. Having said that though, my mum, she's seen it once, told that story many a time on here. And it was more not your traditional kind of hump and long neck, more like just a big mass, and then it just kind of sunk down. But there's been so many stories and things, but recently, not one but 2 really decent sonar returns because of new technology. They're actually able to pick up things more precisely now, and it's quite encouraging because there was a study done a couple of months ago, and they turned round and said they took DNA from Loch Ness and they seen that it had eel DNA in there, so that meant that the Loch Ness Monster was just an eel. But anyone that knows anything about Loch Ness knows it's obvious you're going to find eel DNA in there, because eels are in Loch Ness. That doesn't mean that the Loch Ness Monster is an eel. It's like going to a lake and saying, oh look, I found fish DNA in here. I mean, it's crazy, you know? So I
Yeah.
think there's something there, but I don't know what it is, to be honest with you, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously unidentified creatures out there. The oceans haven't been that thoroughly investigated yet, and we're always finding new species. So
You think about it, we probably know more about Mars than we do, like the bottom of the Mariana Trench and some of the oceans. It's kind of crazy when you think about it that way.
who knows? I'm supposed to go, if this ever ends, I'm supposed to go over to the UK again. It was supposed to be this October, but hopefully it'll happen next year. And I'll definitely visit there. And I definitely want to stay at some paranormal places while I'm over there, because that's one of the, especially England, is one of the most haunted places in the world, just because of all the history there. And you hear the limestone, apparently there's something about limestone buildings that something to do with harboring energy. I don't know if Bill has heard that theory, but there's a town near here called Kingston, Ontario. It's called the Limestone City, and it's one of the most haunted cities in Canada. So there's some allegedly connection.
You're talking my language again. I always talk about rocks and how they've got that kind of component to them, man, really. But, you know, probably we should talk a little bit about your wrestling. And I was going to say to you, when you come over to England and things, I mean, do you have any English wrestlers in your promotion? Talk to us a little bit about your wrestling thing you've got going on there.
Well, the champion of my promotion is the son of the British Bulldog, Davy Boy Smith Jr., who is... Davy Boy Smith is probably the most famous international British wrestler.
He's a legend, absolutely.
And Davy Boy Smith Jr., he's probably going back to WWE next year because he's under contract with a smaller company now. But yeah, we do use UK talent, but it's mostly American and Canadian talent up here in Great North Wrestling, and there's tons of matches on the Hannibal TV. I don't wrestle anymore. I just focus on the promotion and editing and matchmaking.
How's it been with lockdown, Devin? I mean, have you had to go to... Me and my son watch AEW, and they've obviously been doing it at their headquarters, but how's it been for you guys? I mean, has it totally closed it down? What kind of stuff's going on?
We recorded 2 Forest of Fear matches featuring the newest star of Great North Wrestling, the Blood Hunter, who is managed by Kevin Sullivan, a guy that Bill has run into before.
I sure have.
Yeah, he's a star for us now. So we're not allowed to do events in front of crowds. And to be honest, for the Forest of Fear that we taped in October for Halloween, featuring the Blood Hunter there, as you can see, there was supposed to be 5 matches, and 3 of the people backed out due to COVID fear at the last minute. So I don't even think we're going to bother attempting to tape anything else. But I am going to the U.S. Next month. I'll be in Texas December 12th for the SWE Fury show outside of Dallas in Gainesville, Texas. And I'll be in Florida December 19th for a company called NAWA in Daytona Beach. The Blood Hunter will be on those shows, but I'm also doing like a footage exchange agreement with both of those companies where we've already started to air interviews and match videos on my channel from those companies, because I can't create my own content.
Yeah.
I may as well work with companies in states where they are allowing events. And there is social distancing, but in Florida and Texas, you can have small crowds, which is better than no crowds, of course.
Yeah, because notice them start to come back in AEW, and you're right, it's far better, even though it's not as many fans, but the atmosphere is all part of it. And, you know, WWE, it's synonymous with wrestling, right? And Bill talked us through some of your earlier wrestling career. Was it always an intention to end up at the WWE?
It was But that's changed over the years because I was a fan of WWE back when Bill was like, it used to be Saturday morning wrestling, as Bill talked to me about watching with your grandma or whatever. Then you'd go out to play for the afternoon. Then they'd always have something else at 5 or 6 p.m. that you'd watch before dinner. And that was the wrestling that I liked when I was a kid, with the larger than life characters. Now
with the gang.
Yeah, exactly. Now a lot of wrestlers look actually in worse shape than your average people, or they're small, and they just look like they're going through choreographed stunts, which basically is what they're doing. And I'm just not that interested in wrestling anymore. I still like doing the interviews with the old wrestlers and working with some companies that do the more old school style, and we try to do the old school style in Great North Wrestling, but that's why I'm expanding. I cover mixed martial arts. I've interviewed many UFC Hall of Famers, former champions like Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, Bas Rutten, Tank Abbott, Tito Ortiz. The list goes on and on about the MMA guys. Boxing, I've expanded it into, as well as UFO and paranormal. And UFO, if I had my choice, if I could make a living off of it, I would just
Trust me, you can. Trust me, you can. I'm trying it. You can. It's not. Don't do it, man. Don't do it. Stick to what you've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not. That was my goal, honestly, from the time I was always a wrestling fan because my mother was a babysitter, and when I was a baby, she wanted to stay home with me. So at first she only had one kid that she watched, and he was about 4 or 5 years older than me, and he was a huge wrestling fan. So basically, as I was developing as a kid, this kid became like my closest friend, and he was implanting wrestling into my brain. And it was really popular in the 80s when I was a kid. Like,
he was probably trying some moves on you too as well, right? Body slamming you and flipping you and everything else.
I've said it before. In those days, wrestling was so popular, and there wasn't really that much computer stuff, or video games weren't what they were today. All the kids would get together in the neighborhood, and they would be wrestlers, and we would all wrestle, but it would be amateur wrestling, really, but we would all be WWE characters. But I think that actually helped me when I got into amateur wrestling, become a good amateur wrestler, because when I was a kid, I was amateur wrestling with my friends all the time.
Me too, Devin. As you're saying this, I'm having the flashbacks in my mind. Yeah, I understand it.
But yeah, no, so I always wanted to do it. That's why I turned down the scholarships after high school and wanted to focus on becoming a pro wrestler. I learned my craft in Calgary, and also with the Mountie Jacques Rougeau, as I talked earlier. Went to camps all over the place to learn from more legends like the Harley Races of the world and other stars that I trained with. Wrestled in Puerto Rico full-time for 4 years. Wrestled in England. Had many WWE tryouts, had matches for WWE. Finally, I got signed in 2009 after 8 years of paying my dues. Never really making any money, just scraping by, sacrificing. And then when I got the contract, I ended up failing the pre-contract medical for hepatitis C, which it turns out, I didn't even know I had it at the time, was due to a wrestler who's in the WWE Hall of Fame named Abdullah the Butcher. He cut me in a match with a blade that he had cut himself with, and this was proven in court in both Canada and the US. And he had hepatitis C according to his medical records for at least 10 years. So he was found guilty. I lost my contract, which at the time, as a lifelong wrestling fan, devastated me. I actually went through a huge depression. And then the first treatment that I took to get cured of the hepatitis C didn't work. And it was similar to chemotherapy treatment back then. So when that didn't work, I was even more devastated and like actually suicidal, I would say. I may have not have actually tried to kill myself, as in do an intentional overdose or shoot myself. But in those years, I behaved in a lot of ways where I easily could have died, and I just didn't care.
Yeah, living on the edge.
Yeah, and ultimately, I met somebody when I was hopeless, because when the first treatment failed, my doctor said, well, it's going to be 6 years before a better treatment comes out, because they didn't want to put me on a new treatment. They thought that it wouldn't work. And then I was thinking to myself, 6 years, that's my whole career done. So at this point, I was a personal trainer, and one of the women I was training, her husband had gone to medical school and law school. And he basically told me, at this point, I wasn't public about having hepatitis C because I was ashamed of it, like a lot of people are, because it's associated, even though people could get it if they had a blood transfusion before 1990, infected tattoo needle, infected piercing instrument.
If you're in a fight, somebody bleeds on you or whatever. I mean, you know, and
exactly. And I was ashamed of it, but this guy suggested, he said, you're depressed. He knew I was depressed. He said, your life does suck right now. He said, what harm is it going to do? And nobody even knew that I had a contract and lost it at that point. So I was just basically a failed wrestler with a disease that could potentially kill me. And I was miserable. And he basically said, why don't you just go public about it? Because maybe somebody will come out of the woodwork and help you. So I did go public about it. And in that process, I met superstar Billy Graham, who's a WWE Hall of Famer, former world champion, who also had Hep C. And he believes he caught it from wrestling, although with him it wasn't proven in court. And at this time, I had started the legal process against Abdullah the Butcher, because one thing I had in this case with him was I had it on tape. He cut me after cutting himself. And it is proven that sharing razor blades is a way of actually catching Hep C, because you're putting your blood directly in another person's body. It's just like sharing a needle.
Yeah.
It started the legal process, but I was actually also having problems funding it and getting, at this point, he wasn't even giving me his medical records. So I put out like a mini documentary about my situation. And out of it, I became friends with Billy Graham, and he got me hooked up with his hepatitis C doctor in Phoenix, who was one of the leading Hep C specialists. Dr. Hector Rodriguez worked with the Mayo Clinic there, and he got me an appointment. And that guy told me about an experimental treatment that he believed would work on me. And I was going to, there was a settlement with my WWE case, because when they released me due to having Hep C, they alleged that they had a no blood policy due to diseases like Hep C, where matches would be stopped if accidental blood occurs and there'd be no intentional bleeding. So with that policy, and Hep C being a blood-to-blood disease, my lawyers were alleging that like it was discriminatory to allow to like rescind my contract on those grounds. Because if you're gonna, in amateur wrestling, I was still allowed to amateur wrestle. You mentioned some of my accomplishments during that depression. One of the things that saved me is I went back into amateur wrestling for a year after being off for 10 years. And I entered university open tournaments. I actually ended up beating the Canadian University champion in one of these open tournaments. And
that's
then
impressive after being off for so long, and then go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I was training at TriStar MMA in Montreal and at the Montreal Wrestling Club, which at the time George St. Pierre was also training there. And I had a coach, Doug Yeats, who was a 5-time Olympian, but I had been off for all those years, and I only really got back into it for a year. And because I didn't have a university team, I was self-represented. So I had a lot of disadvantages, but I ended up getting silver at the Olympic qualification trials for the London Games. And so I was the alternate for London after being off 10 years. So amateur wrestling saved me because I was so depressed. And I got to accomplish that. And I got a lot of publicity here in Canada out of getting the alternate position. Being
an amazing story.
Yeah. So anyways, we let all that out. A doctor in Canada, luckily, the reason I was bringing that up was because I was allowed to compete in amateur wrestling, because in amateur wrestling, matches are stopped if accidental blood occurs. So it's actually against human rights to discriminate against someone with Hep C if those rules are in place. So I received a settlement that I'm not allowed to talk about, but I was willing. It wasn't anything huge, but I could use that towards getting treated. So I was willing to make the sacrifice and go to the US if I had to. But ultimately, I found a second opinion doctor here in Canada that said, you can take it here in Canada, but because it's experimental, it will not be covered by the Canadian healthcare system. So you'll have to pay for the medication, which ended up costing about 80 grand.
Wow.
Yeah. Plus, I had to be off work for 36 weeks. In that time, I was actually wrongfully terminated from my real job while I was off work, which I later had to go into a 4-year arbitration about. I ended up getting my job back and 25 grand in back pay because I did get another job in between and they subtracted that. But during that treatment, the treatment had horrible side effects, bug under the skin type itching, insomnia. It was the worst period in my life. My grandmother helped me through that, visiting her. So that brings back good memories of her, but it was horrible.
Absolutely.
My partner helped me through that. So I really appreciate it. And also because I was public about it, I had support. I was doing updates. I had a hepatitis C channel that I was doing updates on, and I had other patients supporting me, and I ultimately got cured. I was declared cured in December 2013.
Praise God.
I never got another WWE tryout. In 2016, I was recommended for a tryout by Gerald Briscoe and Jim Ross. Gerald Briscoe is an agent and WWE Hall of Famer who discovered Brock Lesnar. And Jim Ross, any wrestling fan, knows who he is, a WWE Hall of Famer. Many people think he was the greatest commentator of all time. They scouted one of my matches, and they recommended me for a WWE tryout, which I was accepted into based on my medical papers. However, about a week before the tryout, I got an email from someone from WWE saying, after further consideration, you're uninvited from the tryout.
And I was going to say to you, Devin, but I guess I'll refrain from it since you refrained from saying that name. In my mind, as you're saying this, I'm thinking of 3 or 4 people that might have been behind this saying, we're not having this guy here. We don't want this. So I'm sure you can't say, who, but in my mind, the names are certainly rotating through.
Yeah, I don't know who it was, but it was somebody above Gerald Briscoe, and Gerald Briscoe was a recruiter for WWE at this time with a great track record. As I said, you can't get a bigger star than Brock Lesnar, and Jim Ross helped recruit The Rock and John Cena. So whoever canceled me went against 2 of the most credible people ever. And at one point, even Ric Flair watched one of my matches, and he said he was going to recommend me, but I never heard back. And why would Ric Flair lie to me about recommending me? Because what who am I to Ric Flair?
Right. What is there to gain for him? And I'll tell you this, I think you could have had a great run there with Brock Lesnar. I think that would have been, wow, that's something that I think they missed the ball on.
Well, yeah, and the reason I was just bringing that up, because after that 2016 is really when I gave up on that. It was just like, okay, that's not going to happen. I started taking the interviews seriously in about 2015, and basically ever since then, I've just been focusing on interviews and building my own promotion, and I'm doing great at it. And yeah, I wouldn't even, if they were to offer me a massive amount of money, sure, but I wouldn't even want to have an entry-level position with them, because I like doing what I'm doing and I'm happy, and they control you, and I don't really want to sign my life away to them.
And be under their thumb. Yeah.
Exactly. But this is good what I'm doing now, and I'm happy with it.
Praise God. And
Travis, Kev? I'll say quickly, my goal in wrestling was to work with my heroes. I wrestled Psycho Sid, Kevin Nash, Terry Funk, the Honky Tonk Man, Brutus Beefcake, Kamala, Lanny Poffo, Gangrel, Tommy Dreamer.
Top names.
I've wrestled probably about 50 legends in my career.
Don't forget Haku.
Exactly. There's so many I've worked with over the years. I mean, there's too many to even remember. But the only ones I'd want to still wrestle is the Ric Flairs that are retiring, or the Brock Lesnars maybe. But Brock would be the only guy, and he's not even under WWE contract anymore. Yeah. So it's like I kind of lived my dream. I wrestled for WWE. I had matches for them in front of 15,000 people. I was on SmackDown. I was on their Heat show. So I think I kind of accomplished my goals. I may not have had the contract and push, but I worked with my heroes, and even in the interviews, I mean, I just interviewed Ken Patera yesterday. I'm sure Bill remembers.
Legend.
So I'm still working with my heroes, and I've become friends with them. So how many people can say that? Kevin Sullivan, another guy I liked. I'm very close friends with him now. So.
And Devin, sometimes we have to thank God for the unanswered prayer. And like you said, perhaps it wouldn't have worked out for you being under the thumb. I, for one, like you, I always had a dream of becoming a professional wrestler, and I got to know a lot of those guys through working out or the nightclubs that I worked in. But like you, I don't think I could have done it. I guess I was born a leader. I'm not a follower, and I can't have somebody telling me what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. It doesn't work for me. And you're probably the same way. So you have to thank God and praise God for the unanswered prayer, and things have turned out very well for you. And Kevin, Travis, I'll tell you this right now, and I know what I'm talking about here. If he were to go into the WWE locker room now, he could stretch probably all those guys there. I mean, this Devin is legitimate, and it's the truth. He knows what I'm saying is true.
I wouldn't say it because I might run into those people. Well, I will say it, but I will say it because I am not afraid of any of those guys. You're correct.
Yeah, I mean, he's that talented. He's that skilled, and WWE knows that as well. So they really dropped the ball with him. But again, it's all worked out, and it's worked out in Devin's favor because he's doing what he wants to do, how he wants to do it, and is not under their thumb. I've talked with some of those guys that work there, and some still work there. They're miserable because everything is dictated to them, and they're under the thumb, and I just don't know how they do it. I know it's good to make money, but at what expense? Your life, your whole entire personal life.
You're walking on eggshells, and there's so much politics back there, lots of backstabbing. So, yeah, I'd rather do my own work and walk at the beat of my own drum, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I applaud you for it, brother. I do. You've done quite well. And so, you look at some of the other cases where wrestlers, and Billy Jack Haynes mentioned this, and many others, that when you get hurt, and you have a serious injury that you really should be off and recuperating, you can't, because if you go to the office and say, look, I need to be off for 4 weeks, they're going to have somebody else in that spot. It's over. So they know this, and this is how a lot of wrestlers get addicted to painkillers and things of that nature, because they have to do something in order to continue on the daily grind, and they know that they can't stop, because if they do, somebody else is going to be in their spot.
Yes. And you have no the other thing is, if they were to have taken me, let's say if the 2016 had worked out, because I had the past legal situation, maybe they'd want to get back at me. And Bill, I'm sure you know this, sometimes they go out of their way to humiliate people. I recently did an interview with somebody who asked for his release because his wife, his name is Mike Kanellis, his wife is Maria Kanellis.
Mm-hmm.
He had legitimately got her pregnant, and they wanted to do an angle. They started doing it, and he ended up backing out, where they were alleging that someone else got her pregnant. And it was like, he was thinking to himself, like, out of respect for my unborn child and my family, I just can't continue on with an angle where they're trying to make it look like somebody else got her pregnant just for a storyline. So he asked for his release, and they wouldn't give it to him. And then when lockdown happened, when the other options for wrestling jobs went lower because of no crowds, they released both him and his wife, who hadn't asked for releases. So it's like they humiliate them, then they get rid of them. There was another wrestler named Rusev, and I would never have agreed to this, but he did. They did an angle where he had a legitimate wife. She's still with him, Lana, where she was attracted to a guy named Bobby Lashley, and they were making out and having makeout scenes, and like they were right on top of Rusev making out with the husband on the ground.
No
And
way.
then what happened was they ended up firing him a couple months later. It's like after he went through that humiliation of another man kissing your wife. It's actually a coworker. It's not like a movie where you're never going to see this guy again. You're on the road with them.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's ribbing and people making fun of you behind the scenes too. Like, haha, your wife is making out with this guy.
Of course. And think about this, and this goes for a lot of people. People in the high places like this, and Vincent K. McMahon is one of these people. They will make life miserable for those who say, yes, boss, okay, boss, whatever you say, boss, I love you, I'll kiss your feet, whatever. They'll make your life miserable. But the man that stands up and says, nah, you're not doing that to me, pal, that's the people that they respect. And so good for Kanellis that he got out of there. And Rusev, there's no way on this earth I could do something like that and allow my wife to be a part of something like, no way.
Well, he's over on AEW now. He's turned up on AEW. He's I think is it Mithra? Is that his name? Mira. That's it. Mira's his name now over on AEW. But Cody Rhodes, until recently, they couldn't even call him Cody Rhodes because WWE had kept the hold of his name. And it was only when he had to take them to court to get his name released. I mean, that's how much they own you in this, Devin, right? They literally own your name.
Yeah, you sign up for that, and that's one of the sacrifices for them making you a star. But yeah, so I wouldn't want to do that unless the money was really up there. But I wouldn't do a lower level position. I'd much rather continue on with interviews. Joe Rogan is moving to Spotify. I'd love to eventually take Joe Rogan's spot one day.
You very well may, because I'm telling you, you're that talented, and you very well may end up in a position like that. And good for you if you do. I certainly could see great things like that happening for you.
And it's not the be-all, end-all. Like, that was part of the reason I was depressed. I literally thought the whole world revolved around me getting my job, but it's not the same wrestling as it was on Saturday mornings. It's not,
true.
You don't even see people in wrestling t-shirts anymore. It's not as popular as it once was. People have moved on to other forms of entertainment. So I'll still keep my nose in the business, but I'll expand, and I'm satisfied with what I've done in the business at this point. And I do have the respect of my peers, which is how I get all these interviews. So that's what counts.
I agree. I think you're doing great. And again, in being able to secure these type of interviews with some of these high profile people, I mean, it does speak to the respect level and the credibility that you carry. So good for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And, there's a million I can't believe that we are 2 hours, just about 2 hours into. I can't believe it. I mean, the time has gone so fast because there's so many more things that I wanted to ask him. And, I'll say this, guys, in seeing some of the clips of Hannibal in the ring, his style, he's got a hybrid style, if you ask me. He's a Bruiser Brody Haku type in the toughness area, but he has the skill set. Not that those two don't or didn't have the skill set, but he has that amateur type of Bob Backlund type of skill set that he's a dangerous combination, let me tell you. And that's another one, Devin, I would have loved to have seen that years ago, a match with you and Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund never got enough credit, in my opinion. I think he was one of the greatest, certainly in our lifetime, all around. I mean, I think he could have beat a Brock Lesnar. Backlund was something.
Oh, no, that's a claim, Bill. That's a claim. Brock's a hard
I'm
man.
telling you, if you would have watched Bob Backlund was smaller than Brock Lesnar, but Bob Backlund may have been stronger than Brock Lesnar. Bob Backlund was very powerful.
I agree with you, and Bob Backlund was clean, unlike Lesnar, who has actually been on, he's had legal issues in the past that have been resolved, but receiving packages of certain things. And he also failed the UFC drug test. But Bob Backlund, I think he was also a great heel when he did the Mr. Backlund character. I was at some house shows when he was doing Mr. Backlund, and nobody was cheering him. The crowd was just completely booing him, which you never see anymore. And I've met him. I've done a short interview with him. He still keeps himself in top shape. He actually takes CBD now. He's a proponent of that, and he says it's allowed him to keep up with his workouts. But yeah, he's underrated, but I definitely think he was a great heel, and it's too bad at the time when Hulk Hogan took his spot.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be a heel because he had a young daughter, and at that time, if you were the kid of a heel, you would get a lot of slack at school from other kids because people took wrestling more seriously. So he didn't want to put his daughter through that. But
plus, he was genuinely a good man, Devin. He was, he couldn't help that he was really a good man and had a good personality. And I'll tell you, for the people, and I love superstar Billy Graham. I'm a big fan of his, but I disagree with him on this. Bob Backlund did draw people, and Bob Backlund was over. And Bob Backlund did sell out the Garden, and people were really into Bob Backlund, and maybe it started to wane right before the Hulk Hogan years. But Bob Backlund carried that title for over 5 years, and I thought he was great.
The thing about Billy, and I understand it, and it's kind of was his downfall, unfortunately, and it still bothers him to this day, and I understand it. He could have been Hulk Hogan easily. Hulk Hogan gimmick. Yeah. And if you watch when he was champion, he always says there was pandemonium in the crowd. Yeah. The crowd was actually cheering and booing him. And it was just incredibly loud. All races loved or hated him. He was very controversial. He had a better physique than anybody. And at the very peak of his popularity, where he could have actually just skyrocketed to the moon, and actually the Hulk Hogan era could have happened then. Vince McMahon Sr. had already promised a year before that Backlund was going to be champion, so he stuck to his guns and put it on Backlund, who was not as hot at the time, and he was great, but he didn't have the the mainstream like potential to be like a megastar and cross over to Hollywood.
I agree. Yeah.
So that just killed him. And instead of like sticking around, he was so devastated. He actually went away for years. There was even reports that he had died. He went back to digging ditches and bouncing.
Sad.
And like he was so devastated. Then when he came back, he didn't want to do the superstar Graham that was so popular anymore. He wanted to be the ninja.
Yeah, the karate gimmick. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
that.
and he still sold out the Madison Square Garden with that.
Yeah.
But he had lost like all the momentum because he was so depressed. He disappeared and he was never like a cocaine guy, but he went into downers.
Yeah.
And he went into a depression and it still bothers him to this day. They did give him a couple more runs. But yeah, I can understand that he kind of had the rug pulled from him. And instead of maybe switching to NWA right away or AWA and like trying to say, I'll show them, I'll do it in another company, he just kind of went into a depression. And unfortunately, he is a great guy, by the way. He might be controversial, but he helped me. And he's not arrogant. And I've heard this from so many wrestlers. When he was champion, he treated everybody the same. And
I believe it.
He never had an ego about that. Yes, he is bitter. I mean, he's poor. So I'd be a little bit bitter too if like he was the first superstar in wrestling. He was the first one to use the name superstar. Now they're all called superstar. Hulk Hogan made a fortune off of his gimmick. Hulk Hogan always treated him like crap. And he was the one that when Hulk Hogan couldn't get booked, he got Hulk Hogan booked at the start of his career in the Alabama territory. And I know it's terrible, but he's the one that helped teach Hulk Hogan about steroids.
Yeah.
Like, he actually helped Hogan get off the ground, and then Hogan completely turned his back on him. And they hadn't talked for years. I was there. There's a clip in 2013. They reunited at a convention, and then Hogan never talked to him again since then.
Amazing, brother. It's amazing, and I'm sure we could talk all night about stories like that. And yes, I always did like him, and I thought his charisma was off the charts. I mean, he had the best body, so he was over there physically, and really didn't have to do a whole lot in the ring. Did the strongman thing, but he was a great bump guy too. And but had that charisma that, I mean, just whether they loved him or hated him, man, there was a reaction from everybody there when he came in.
Ric Flair got his first hair dye job from Billy Graham's first wife.
Wow.
So he was copied by Ric Flair in many ways. Dusty Rhodes really copied him.
A whole list.
Jesse Ventura, Scott Steiner.
Yep.
And you know as well as I do where he got his speaking ability from. He used to be a preacher.
Yeah.
So that's why he took the name Billy Graham.
Yeah, yes, because he loved Billy Graham. Yeah.
He went off the road a bunch of times, like many of us do.
Yeah.
But he still is religious. There's even he even did some religious wrestling shows at one point in time that were well attended. One of them had over 10,000 people at one of these mega churches in Phoenix. So yeah, he's a good guy. Yes, he has his bad sides, but his heart is really good.
God bless him. Bruno loved him. And that says a lot right there, because Bruno was a man's man, and Bruno would let you know whether he liked you or not. And he always loved Billy Graham, and to my knowledge, they always have a very good relationship. So that speaks volumes if Bruno had that kind of regard for him.
And as I'll always help him as much as I can. I know he's going through cancer. He just had cancer surgery on his nose this week. I posted a video about it, a huge chunk of his nose taken out.
We'll pray for him. When we get to the prayer list, we'll pray for him.
You definitely should. He's a survivor. That's the most impressive thing. But he's the one that got me hooked up on my second Hep C treatment, and he got me out of that downward depression because there was finally some hope. that I would be cured. So he didn't even know me. He just felt bad for me, knowing my story, and he had seen Abdullah assault other wrestlers in the past. So he knew what kind of person Abdullah was. So he wanted to help me. And just so people know, wrestling, you're playing a character. Some people have said, oh, well, you wrestle Abdullah the Butcher. How can you not expect him to cut you? Well, he was a janitor from Windsor, Ontario, before he got into wrestling. He's not from the Sudan, and you don't go into a pro wrestling match expecting somebody's going to have a hepatitis C infected razor blade. And at some point, without telling you, he's just going to cut you with this infected razor blade. And by the way, you're going to get $50 for this match.
I mean, guys, listen to what Devin's saying here now. And for the people that are watching this now, listen to what he's saying. I mean, this is beyond comprehension. And again, he loved wrestling so much that he was willing for a meager amount of money just to try and, pave the road and build up and get to the place where he wanted and needed to be. And now he's in there with this guy, Abdullah, who I never cared for at all. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Devin. In the ring, if instances of blood are going to take place, and they say, we want to get color here, or juice, or whatever, the wrestler will do that himself. In most cases, to himself.
Yeah. Unless they don't know how to do it, and then in that case, they will ask. Some people are squeamish about doing it, and then they'll ask, but that's in the case where someone else does it, it would be previously discussed, and they would have a clean blade to do it.
So think about that, guys. Just think about that for a second. So again, this is an individual who, Abdullah, was a bleeder. So this guy's bleeding in just about every match, and he made sure that the other guy was bleeding in just about every match. And, here Devin's in this thing, not knowing that this individual has hepatitis C, and now, it's too late because now he's infected after the cut takes place. And
I was actually bleeding from my own cut, but I guess it wasn't enough for him, because he actually cut me 5 times, and they timed it in court, which I mentioned earlier. He was found guilty in Canada, in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, of negligence, because he knew he had Hep C, and he knew it was dangerous to share razor blades, assault because he didn't have my permission, and battery because it caused bodily harm. So he was found guilty in Canada. And then 2 years later, in Georgia, where he lives, we got the judgment endorsed. We had to have another trial there. In the meantime, he transferred properties. So he transferred assets because he knew once we got the American judgment, we would be able to collect on his properties. So now there's another case going on, actually. 10 years later, it's still going on because he hasn't paid 1 cent.
And I was just going to ask you that. Have you collected anything? And you just answered, wow, so not 1 cent from this.
So there's a new case that has to do, it's called fraudulent transfers, because those are illegal transfers that he made. He basically gifted properties to family and friends. So now there's another case we get related to the illegal transfers of assets, because technically you cannot do that.
Yeah,
you've lost a judgment. It's actually illegal. And
right. It's a blatant attempt to, hide those assets from being forfeited and seized. Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense.
And it was done after the Canadian judgment, so he knew it was happening. And actually, the restaurant property, because he has 2 restaurants. There's still one in operation, but. It's funny. I'll tell you guys some dirt on him. His real wife has been separated from him for 10 years. She lives in one of their houses and operates the restaurant in a mall that he still has. He lives with another woman, a woman that he has transferred some of the properties to, and his wife hates him. His real wife hates him. So there's a lot of complications in this situation, but he has not been cooperative at all about the judgment. I mean, he does have pensions coming in. He has a Canadian pension plan and he has an American pension coming in. He lives in a house still that he partially owns.
Is he in his 70s now, Devin?
I believe he's in his late 70s or he's 80.
Yeah.
He's somewhere around there, but it's just been so costly, but there needs to be an end to it. And I've spent over $100 on the or $100,000 on the legal part of it, so I'm going to finish it.
Yeah, and I'm going to pray for you on that as well, that God will help you to have victory in that and get back what is just.
I don't expect to get it all. I never expect to get it all because one of the reasons, it's not just the medical bills. He did cost me a contract, but I just want my legal fees and medical bills back.
Yeah.
I'll be happy with that.
And I pray that you get it, because this is just absolutely not right. And furthermore, and Kevin, Travis, I don't know if you know who this individual is. If not, just punch up Abdullah the Butcher on YouTube and you can see some of his matches, which are absolutely gory. I mean, this guy would carry a fork and other types of things in, and like Devin said, whether it be that or a blade or whatever, you know, he's cutting people open. And here, you know, the whole time this guy's got a disease, hepatitis C, and he's cutting other wrestlers open, and then, you know, his blood and the wrestler's blood are mixing together, and all. It's just terrible.
And Billy Graham wrestled him 9 times, and Billy had hep C. He had a liver transplant due to it. He finally got cured a few years ago, but like, there's at least one connection of another guy he wrestled.
And I wondered that myself when I was thinking about you, and you mentioned Billy Graham, you know, some of his difficulties, and I wonder if he did, in fact, we'll never know, but you know, wonder if he did contract it from him.
Yeah, if there wasn't the video of the sharing of the blade, I wouldn't have had a case. But it's so hard to prove in any other case. But the doctor, we had the same genotype. There's multiple genotypes. I was tested shortly before the match and was clear, and then he had it for a long time. And then when it's 2 people bleeding, blood is flowing outwards. So just by the sharing of the blade, it just increases the percentage by so much. And as I said, he wasn't actually found guilty of the transmission. It was just negligence, assault, and battery. So. Just
a terrible, terrible situation. But I'll say this, despite it all, God has brought you full circle and has helped you to be in a place that is a good place, and you're doing very well in your life, and I praise God for that. So there is a silver lining to this, and I hope ultimately you can collect and at least, like you said, get your medical expenses and court fees and all that kind of stuff back. I mean, that would be great, and I pray that it happens for you. So again, Devin, I'm going to shut up and let these 2 guys, I'm sure they want to, and we got to have you back. I hope you come back, because there's so much more that I want to ask you, and I'm sure they do as well. So hopefully we'll have a part 2.
But I'm about to have to have another bathroom break for this, so we could get maybe another question or 2 in. And
sure.
I appreciate that you guys had me on.
Because that's like nearly 2:30 over here at 2:30 a.m. in the UK. We'll be here all night.
You're a trooper.
I know, dude. I work off East Coast time, so it's okay. But Travis, you've got a last question for Devin, then we'll start to wrap it up. How's that sound?
That's great. I was going to say, I don't really have a question. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show, being part of it. Love the conversation we've had. And like Bill said, really want to get you back on. Would love to talk more about UFO disclosure, especially once you watch Skinwalker Ranch, the series. Definitely want to talk about that and some of the other experiences. But thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an extreme pleasure.
I'll find a way to watch the series, and we could do a special on it.
Sounds good.
Fantastic.
That sounds really, really good. And again, just to second what Travis said, brilliant getting to know you here today. Love to speak to you again. And what an amazing story, you know, what you're sharing there with us about your experience with the wrestling. So thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Thank you. And for the fans out there on your channel, thehannibaltv.com is my website. I am on Twitter at Devin Hannibal, DEVON HANNIBAL. We are on Instagram and Twitter also at the Hannibal TV and Facebook at the Hannibal TV. So thanks a lot. And yeah, I'll have to have Bill on again soon.
Can't wait.
To definitely get into the UFO and paranormal talk on my channel. And I appreciate you having me on. And I really appreciated Bill's comments about my grandmother. It really helped me, and I sent the video that I made of the clip of it to various family members of mine, and they really appreciated it as well.
I'm keeping all of you in prayer, brother, and anytime I can be of service or a help to you, don't hesitate. You have my number, and anything I can do to help you or your family, I certainly will do it, and will be keeping you in prayer.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, Devin, God bless you and your family. And I guess you've already had your Canadian Thanksgiving, so I can't say happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, technically, my YouTube channel, we only have like 4% Canadian viewers now. It's so popular in the US, and actually it's second in India. So I feel like I'm an honorary American. One day I hope to have a residence there for at least the winter. So happy Thanksgiving to all of you and all the American fans watching.
Fantastic. Well, happy Thanksgiving, Devin, to you and your family. And we can't wait to have you back for the part 2, and then looking forward to coming on to your show as well.
Excellent. Have a great evening, everybody.
You too, my brother.
Too, man. You too. That was awesome stuff.
We could have talked all night with him.
Yep, that was really cool. That nice guy. You did say that was going to be a good show, Bill. What a story that is, you know. Damn, that character Abdullah. What a piece of work that is. But his whole life, you know, the wrestling, what he achieved before he got to that kind of level, and to have it taken away like that, and then go through everything else. Wow.
He has certainly been through it, and I'm happy for him that he's come out on the other side. And again, praise God. So we see, here's another example of no matter how bad things can get in life, God can always make a way. And he certainly made a way for Devin, and he will make a way for anybody that is down and out and that really wants to call on him. And so we know that God makes the impossible possible, and we praise him for it. So,
well,
boy,
Bill,
oh boy, guys,
Bill,
what a
you
show.
need to, but before we go to the prayers and things, I'll come to you in a second, Travis. But I mean, I'm really enjoying this kind of wrestling theme that we've had going on. These guys are different from what you perceive, though, if you just know them from wrestling. And you have to work your contacts to get us more wrestlers as time goes on, okay?
Oh, I could do that. And I'm looking to see if we could get Rick Steiner on. He's another one that's, he's like Devin. And Stroh as well, the friend of mine, Maestro.
Stroh was cool. He was awesome, man. I really liked that.
These guys are legitimate athletes and legitimate what I call shooters in that in real life, they can do very well for themselves, and the average man would be in big trouble if they had to have any physical encounters with these individuals.
What do you make it tonight then, Travis? It's a good one, right?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I agree with you. Each one of these wrestlers, because they do bring a totally different perspective to sports and athleticism. And an industry that, as you mentioned, Kev, which I found interesting that you brought up about how that when they sign with like the WWE and things like that, their brand is owned by that organization. They control everything about them. And while you're employed with them, that can be great. They can make you lots of money. But if you ever leave, you walk away having to fight for your name and your brand and everything.
Literally your own family name, you know. It's crazy, man. That's insane. But that's Vince McMahon for you.
Yes, and that's the level of control. So it goes right back to the devil. So anybody that would want to make a deal with the devil, he would say, I will give you this, but I want this. And what I want is far greater than what I'll give.
That's what Devin literally said in different words. He said, if you want the fame, that's the trade-off you make, you know?
Yeah.